Everybody, thank you so much for joining me today. I have been so excited to be able to share Janae with you. You guys are going to love this interview, and I'm not going to take time to introduce her because she's going to do such a better job of introducing herself. So, everybody, I want you to meet Janae Young. Tell us all about yourself. Tell us everything we need to know.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here. My name is Janae Young. I'm a college admissions coach. So I work with high school students throughout the college application process to raise their SAT and ACT scores and get accepted into their top schools. I've been doing this work for over 7 years. Since way back in 2016, I actually started my business at 15 in high school. And I'm now a Stanford alumni that works with high school students full time. So I love my job. I love coaching, and I'm super excited to talk about all things teenagers, all things college, whatever, wherever our conversation guides us. So yeah.
Mhm. I have to tell you that, so a little backstory. I have never actually met Janae in person, but we were in the same mastermind. And I remember hearing her story. And it's like my mom heart and my teacher heart and my coaching heart all just like exploded at the same time. Like, I have got to talk to her. And like, you're the same age as my oldest kid. So I'm like, oh my gosh, like, I am old enough to be her mom. And she blows my mind. So, yeah, tell me, like, I would love to hear your story again. Just like, what happened when you were 15 that kicked you into this? Like, tell me the story.
Yeah, definitely. When I was 15, my business, as I think many people experience this, just started kind of out of like a basic need. For me, when I was 15, I knew that I didn't want to rely on my parents for spending money all the time. Like I was kind of getting to a place of emerging independence, and I was really young for my grades. So I couldn't just go get a job at like Chick-fil-A. I was 15. And so I was kind of like, okay, like let me try to find a side hustle that would allow me to get just $20 if I want to go shop at Forever 21 or something. And so my sister had told me about one of her friends. I remember it very specifically. We were in Gap with my mom and my sister, my older sister, and she started talking about her friend who had built out this babysitting clientele and could pay for her own bills and her phone and her gas. And I was like, that's so cool. She has so much agency. And so I said, okay, well, why don't I give that a try? So I tried to start a babysitting business. It did not work. It failed very quickly. I lived in a retiree neighborhood, actually. So I went door to door and everyone was like, we don't have kids, but we'll pass on the word. And I was like, okay, great. So that failed quite quickly. And then I just always loved teaching. I was always the person in class who would buzz around and like try to help other students once I was done with my work. And I really loved talking and engaging and communicating with other students. And so I said, okay, why don't I try tutoring? So I just started with one person in my Algebra 2 class. I made an offer after class. I saw that she was struggling next to me in our seats. And I said, hey, I could tutor you after school. I had no idea what I was doing. I like set a price range. I think I said like, I'll tutor you for $10 to $12 an hour. And her mom was like, what does that mean? Like, is it 10? Is it 11 or 12? And I was like, pick one.
Yes.
Like, that's how naive I was. But I loved what I did. And so I started with one person, and then two became three, and then three became four. And I started to see the magic of peer education. When I would talk and connect with a student, they could get it in a way that they understood so clearly because I was speaking their own language. And so when I kind of was maybe at 5 or 6 students, I had to go back and play soccer in the spring. So my after school time was going to be consumed. And I said, okay, well, I don't want to disappoint them. So let me just try to hire someone. Let me just find someone on the side who could do this with me. So then I hired my first employee, and then one became two, two became three. And then by around like 16 or 17, I'd built out a full agency model in Wilmington, North Carolina, my hometown. So
Wow.
we were tutoring K through 12 students. I managed a team of tutors, and then I also was tutoring myself. And that's kind of how my company started. And then when I got to Stanford and when I was going throughout the college application process myself, I felt like there was no one that could really understand what it was like to apply to college in this day and age, with the process having changed so rapidly and us being in kind of a more competitive environment than ever. And I would try to ask, I would try to find coaches, and I just couldn't relate to anyone. And so when I got to Stanford, I decided to be that person that I wish I had to kind of serve as a guidance point and mentor throughout the college application process. And I pivoted my business into test prep and college admissions specifically. And so that's what I've done now for years. And I've been blessed to work with students around the world. So that's kind of my story.
It is the most incredible story. Like I could listen to it over and over and I'm still like, oh my gosh. Like I can picture my daughter is 15 and I'm like, no, like I'm picturing, no, I'm not slamming on my daughter, but I am saying that like 15, like that is really, like that's a young age to have all of that going. So at that point in time, were you already like, was there a part of you in your mind that was focused on like Stanford? Or was it just like, yes, I want to make money so I can go to the Gap or I can go to Forever 21? Or was that your focus?
It actually, my focus wasn't to start it to get into an Ivy. And I think that's really important for people to know.
Mhm.
I always, to speak to like what you were saying about being 15, I did a podcast interview last week and I was talking about how at an adolescent's journey at 15, 14, 15, typically there's sparks of curiosity that start to
Hmm.
rise. And so what I do with students when I work with them freshman and sophomore year is really nurture that so that they're able to go and create the like whatever it is that they want, whether it's they start that club or they do that new thing and they're just trying to figure it out along the way. So when I first started, I wasn't thinking of like building a multi-million-dollar company. I just knew like, hey, there's something that I could try. Let me just see where this could go.
Mhm.
And so within a year, I definitely knew I wanted to scale it long term. I made that decision at 16, which was significant to say, like,
Wow.
gonna build $1 million company and, do this thing. Um,
Yeah.
it started so innocently. And I always like to say to students, like, you never know where that spark of curiosity is gonna take you. So just run with it. So
Mhm.
that was kind of that. But my older sister, I have a sister who's like 3 years older than me. So when I was a freshman in high school, she was a senior. So she was going through the college admissions process. So I got to see that in my home directly.
Mhm.
And she ended up going to Princeton. And I went to a high school that was not competitive. So it was a really big deal. Like
Wow.
people didn't go to Ivy League schools at my high school, let alone young Black women. And so there were so many people that looked up to her. And so I definitely think I
Yeah.
felt the pressure of that as I was kind of going through my own stages after she'd left home. And I probably, when I look back, like in addition to wanting spending money at like the Gap, right? It
Right.
also probably was this moment of wanting my own image, like my own thing that I could do, not
Yeah.
being trapped in her shadow. And so I think it was like a perfect storm of things that led me to make a really bold decision that obviously changed my life.
Yes. And that's like incredible. So your sister went to Princeton
Yeah.
and you went to Stanford. And in the middle of this, so I like that you spoke a little bit to this, like breaking out of my own, like kind of getting out of your sister's shadow a little bit. So what was it like to have that really big desire to like, I'm going to grow this $1 million business or this multi-million-dollar business?
Yeah.
And oh my gosh, like those are some big shoes to feel, like to
Oh, yeah.
fill.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
was that like, that pressure, or what, how did you handle that?
That is a good question. So my family would never say this, but I think for context of the pressure conversation, it's like helpful to know. So my parents met at MIT. That's where they did their undergrad. So they're
Mhm.
both engineers. And then my sister went to Princeton. So by the time I was going through the college application process, it was like everyone in my family went to an Ivy League school. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, and they never, I think a lot of the students that I work with, sometimes they have parental pressure. And so that's something that we're always coaching on, but I actually didn't have it
Mhm.
significantly. Like my parents obviously wanted me to do the best, but they were like, whatever you do, wherever you go, we're going to support you. So it didn't feel like it was in the home, but I think I just felt it like a pressure cooker inside of myself of wanting
Mm.
to live up to those expectations. And so I definitely was very focused, very driven in high school. I think the biggest thing, like I now have tools that I coach people with on how to manage that pressure, but I don't know if I knew how to do it at the time. I think I was just like doing the best I could to go through it and hoping that it all worked out at the end. I knew definitely that if I focused for a constrained period of time, that
Mhm.
I was going to figure it out. And I would say like that's probably the biggest belief that got me through, because I think most people when they're building their business, they have a period of like 2 to 3 years, or I would say during any audacious feat in their career where it's just not working out. That's just
Mhm.
the beginning of entrepreneurship. It's just not doing that. And so
Yeah.
that was for me like 16, 17, and 18 really vulnerable years in a teenager's life. And so I think for me, I was just like, yeah, I'm younger than everyone in this industry. It feels like I have no one that I can't like Google how to start a business as a 16-year-old. I tried, trust me, and it popped up with nothing. So I'm just going to figure this out. And I just I trusted if I didn't quit that I eventually would. And
Yeah.
that even if it took me 10 years, like I would eventually figure it out. And I just said I wouldn't quit on myself until I did. And so I just trusted the steps that would come, and that those steps would come if I started taking the first one, which may have looked like trying to, go into chemistry tutoring in addition to math. And that like eventually I would build this thing with lasting
Yeah.
legacy.
That's incredible. So when you're working, so you have all this experience, right?
Yeah.
Like there's this expectation that like, okay, I'm going to do this, and an expectation maybe that you set for yourself, and you might be tutoring kids. I know you said freshmen, sophomore, juniors, or not so much.
Now I work with 9th through 12th graders. At the
9 to 12.
I was working, I guess, with people who were in my grade. And yeah.
Yeah.
So it was like as I grew up, that was, I guess, what my clientele looked like. So yeah, but now 9th through 12th graders.
Okay, so when you're working with those kids and you're helping them get ready for the SATs and the ACTs and to write those like those letters and the essays and all those things, and you're seeing them like, I have this big dream I want to go after. How do you handle their like when they're like, but
Mhm.
when that anxiety or that stress kicks in, how do you coach them through that? Like, what do you do, or what is your technique to say, okay, when you go into this test
Yeah.
and you feel it,
Yeah.
what do you do?
Yeah. So I think I, coming from the coaching space, incorporate a lot of life coaching into my work in college coaching and college admissions, which is
Mhm.
pretty rare. It's typically not the most mental health aware space, but
I love it.
uh, I view it as a critical part of the work that I do, because I like to say it's not just my job to help someone get into the school that they want, it's my job to help them thrive there. And so I think it's the particular there's mindsets, things and life skills that they need to learn throughout their journey to allow them to do that. And I actually like sneakily weave it in a lot of the times through the test prep and college work that I do with students. So I would say test anxiety is a separate thing, but I find like the pressure cooker overall is typically the student getting into whatever school that they're thinking they need to, or they want to get
Mm.
into. And so typically what that conversation initially looks like, if I see there's a lot of pressure coming up, it's just like understanding that they're going to be successful no matter what.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
It was going through the application process. That was my core belief that I feel so many students miss out on, which was, I'm going to be fine no matter what. Like, I definitely wanted to go to really competitive schools, but I always like to say this business that exists now isn't because I went to Stanford. Like, this was going to happen, period. And it was just a matter of, okay, like, what school do I think would be the best fit to help me get there? What school do I think would help me on my entrepreneurial journey? But I was still going to create the vision for impact that I saw in the world no matter what. I was still going to take my passions for education and entrepreneurship and help people no matter what. And so when you're really sold on the vision that you have long term and have an unwavering commitment to that, it opens up so much more freedom in, I think, the schools that you go to. And just knowing that, like, even if you don't get into the one school that maybe you're feeling a lot of pressure around, you're still going to be able to go after this long-term vision. And I start there with them. And they oftentimes won't take it from that advice from someone else if they haven't
Mm-hmm.
gone through the process. Like, they believe me because I'm like, trust me, I went through the 4 years at the school that you're thinking of, and I can still tell you that some people waste those degrees.
Yeah.
And some people go and do really great things, and it comes from their decision to do so. So it's more about what's inside of you than any school title. And I actually start there as a baseline so that even when we are discussing competitive schools, that's their self-concept that they're working from, of like, I'm going to be successful no matter what, and I'm going to create the impact that I want to have in the world no matter what. And then I'm just making a decision of what schools I think would help me along that journey. And so that can decrease a lot of pressure from the get-go. And
So
also when students are focused on that, when they're actually focused on the vision, instead of, I have to get into this school for a certain level of validation, that's actually when they become more competitive applicants. Because going on Reddit and being like, being anxious all day, you're
right.
instead just like, oh no, like this is the one particular thing that I'm super passionate about. And I'm doing everything that I can in my academics and my extracurriculars to make that happen. And they're so full of vision and inspiration and change that they naturally then attract the types of schools that they want to go to. And so oftentimes just having that shift in vision is enough to decrease a lot of the pressure that they're going through. So that's the first place I typically start, in just developing their self-concept. I would say the second is like, sometimes things do get very pressure oriented. And so I just help my students process big emotions as they come up. And that's really important, to have a safe space to be able to like talk about things with someone as you're going through it, because the college application process, I like to say, is like a life, it's a perfect life example of teaching you rejection and failure and like all of the things that you're going to go through at every stage of life, but that you start to go through for the first time at maybe 16 or 17. And so when those things do come up, just teaching them how to process those emotions, and also going to the worst case scenario with them. There's many times that I've said to a student like, okay, what if you don't get in? And they're like, wait, what? And I'm like, I'm totally going to help you get in. But what
Aren't you supposed to make that happen for me?
What if you don't? And it's because oftentimes they haven't even explored the worst case scenario. And I do this with both testing and college admissions. When students have a lot of anxiety, I'm like, what if we go to the worst case scenario? And I talk them through it step by step. I'm like, what if you didn't get in? And they're like, well, I'd probably go to this school. And I'm like, okay, what would you do? And they're like, I'd probably get an internship. I'd probably do this. And I was like, yeah, maybe you'd have to be a little bit more well-connected and a little bit more audacious to get your foot in the door. I'm definitely going to acknowledge the privilege certain schools have. Like, that's a definite done deal. There's a reason people want to go, but you would figure it out. You would totally figure it out. And so when I can walk them through that worst case scenario, that helps so much with the anxiety of being like, actually, I'm going to be safe in any scenario here. And I think a lot of teens need to hear that as they're going through things like college admissions and test anxiety. And then finally, when it actually comes to testing, when students, I like to call the skill that I work on with a lot of students in the moment test taking. So I coach on anxiety before, during, and after. So like before, we're oftentimes saying like, what can we do to decrease your anxiety going into test day? And that's typically making sure you're prepared, that you've actually like prepared yourself. That'll decrease a lot of anxiety at the front end. And then also figuring out, what thoughts are you having about the test? If you are having thoughts like, I'm bad at math, chronically bad at math, we may want to fix that. We may want to fix that before you go in, right? That's probably causing some anxiety. And then when it comes up in the moment, helping them learn how to redirect their focus. So for example, if it feels like, if they have a thought like, I'm running out of time, and that then causes a lot of pressure, teaching them how to see their thoughts without engaging with it. Right. So for example, oh, my brain is under a time pressure situation. My brain's always going to tell me I'm running out of time. That's its job. But that doesn't mean that it's true. Right. That doesn't mean that it's something that I have to engage with. That doesn't mean it's something I have to freak out over. And so then how could I redirect my focus to maybe say something like, okay, if I have 1 minute left, what are the 5 questions that I think I can answer with that minute left? And so then that puts them in a state of certainty versus panic. And so there's a lot of that work that I do with students in terms of test anxiety to decrease their stress too. So those are like the 3 main elements that I would say it comes up in.
I love that. And it's just applicable because I know a lot of people listening are, sometimes the mom is listening, and it just translates so much into, okay, so all of those stories that, you know, our
Yeah,
brains are telling us these crazy stories. And like, I love just that you are really emphasizing saying, okay, you can notice that thought and not like adopt it and let it move in, right? It doesn't need to move into you. You can be like, oh, okay, like
yeah,
swish that one on by, and not to get wrapped up in it. And not that it's always an easy thing to swap by, but just giving people that technique and just saying, hey, this is such a good
absolutely.
thing. Yeah.
Absolutely. I tell my students the story of, and I would say this is like a good example. I really, which is funny because I moved to California for 4 years. So I had 5 hour flights like multiple times a year. I really don't like flying. I get very
Mhm.
anxious when I fly. And so every time I fly, my brain will tell me like, yes, the plane's going down. Like this
Yes.
and the first few times I would get really panicked and very anxious as I was flying alone. And now I just expect it. I'm like, yep,
Yeah.
like I'm flying. My brain's going to have a temper tantrum. It's going to tell me that this turbulence is lethal and it'll all be fine and I'll land. And that's the routine. And
Uh-huh.
so I can almost like comfort that part of myself that I'm like, oh, okay, this is just anxiety that's naturally going to come up. And it's the same
Yeah.
with teens as they're going through their academics, right? Like if you're anxious on a test and you always feel like you have that thought in the back of your head, like I'm running out of time, just recognize it's always going to be there. And that doesn't mean that that's true. And,
Hmm.
or if it's like, I'm unprepared or I'm behind in the college admissions process, that anxiety is just going to be there and you can still accept it without engaging with it.
Yeah. It's such a big deal to be able to say, oh, okay, I know when I get on that plane, I'm going to feel like
Yeah.
this is it. I should probably call my parents or something just to say goodbye before I take off.
Yeah,
And just saying, okay, this happens every time. And then letting yourself not leave the plane,
exactly.
which
Exactly.
is such a big deal to say, whoa, we're not jumping out of this just
Yeah.
because you feel this way,
Yeah. Yeah.
and making that
It's just
okay.
like that's just what happens every time I fly. And so for
Yeah.
my students, they're just like, this happens every time I test, and it's totally fine.
Yeah. And it does take it's just such a world of difference when you're not like, how do I make it stop right now?
Yeah.
Like I have to get off of this. How do I get out of it? I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. So back to like the whole college like prep process.
Mhm.
If you are like, what do you feel like is the most misunderstood part of this whole process? Because I think like when I think about, you know, my kids, like two of my kids have graduated, and like one went to Butler University and one went to Trine University. And that's great. Like they didn't go to Ivy League schools. And it was still a process. Like, what is the most either misunderstood or maybe even most important part of that process?
Yes. I would say the most misunderstood, I love this question, is that the college admissions process starts senior year. That's what a lot
Mm,
of people think. And it actually is a culmination of your 4 years. So a
yeah.
lot of people only start thinking about the college application process maybe towards the end of a student's junior year or the summer before senior year. When in reality, I teach a 4-step framework throughout all 4 years of a student's high school career. So
Mhm.
freshman year is about foundation building. Sophomore year is about extracurricular exploration. So like exploring
Mm,
things that are starting to bubble up. Junior year is about developing leadership in maybe that area of interest that you're starting to see maybe a good fit. And then senior year is where we tie it all together with the essays and the activities and whatnot. But you can only, I always like to say, you can only harvest senior year what you plant in sophomore year.
ooh, I love that. I love
So
that.
if you don't have certain activities that maybe you've done, you can't write about those senior year. If you don't have certain experiences, those don't make it in your application. And if you don't build the habits in terms of time management, managing procrastination, knowing how to work towards long-term assignments like a college essay, then those habits catch up to you senior year. So that's why I would say that's the biggest misconception, period. And then also, I think a lot of people only think that they kind of need college support, college application support if they are applying to Ivies. I actually just had a conversation with a girlfriend like 2 nights ago. And I was like, most of my students are not just applying to Ivies, they're applying to a lot of schools. And a
Mhm.
lot of schools we've seen have like between 5 to 15% acceptance rates from UC schools, UT Austin, Chapel Hill, Georgetown, obviously Stanford, Northeastern, Northwestern, U Chicago, like all of these schools that are outside of just those 8 that we call Ivies equally need support throughout for students to have really competitive applications. And even if your student isn't applying to competitive schools, when they do the work to have a strong application, it decreases so much stress for the entire family.
Yes, for sure.
I had a mom email me yesterday, and she had like forwarded my email to one of her friends and was like, save her contact info. We're not up at midnight doing any of my child's things. Like, it's just the best. There's no tension. And so I just think it's helpful for parents and everyone to realize it's a family project, and there's a lot of hoops to jump through, and it's changed drastically from decades ago. And so having that context, that parent education going in, can just help everyone feel so much more calm. And also just knowing, like, also your teen at that point in time is going to be at the most resistant point in their teenage.
Yes.
So it's helpful to have someone that they can listen to. Like, my clients always say, like, my kid listens to you because you don't, you're not like another mom or another dad figure. Right. And I say, yes, that's so helpful, because it's really hard to be moving towards deadlines when your 17-year-old is like, I don't want to listen to you, mom. Like, so I would say that's just like the real raw truth of the college process. I don't know. You've had 2 students go through it. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that it's very interesting, because I always like to joke that like my older 2 and my younger 2 are from separate families, and they're totally not, but I'm like, what happens? Like, they're so different. And it was funny, because I know that with my oldest, we went to all the places trying to find out, like, where do you feel comfortable? And it was funny for me, like, I feel like the most involvement I had wasn't necessarily in the test prep or in the writing. It was finding a place where he was like, okay, this is really where I want to go. And we just went, I mean, we visited and visited and visited all these different places. And he had the benefit of, he had been to different like swim camps at like University of Alabama, and he'd been to IU, and he'd been to Purdue. So he'd been to all of the places. And I thought, like, in my head, I was thinking, oh, he's going to end up in Bloomington. And we got there. I'm like, he's not going to go here. Like, it was so funny, because I was like, this is not what I expected at all. And the last place we visited, we walked on, and it was 2 minutes. And I'm like, oh, this is it.
Oh,
like, wow. It was just, it was just like a whole shift in his demeanor. It was like, oh, this is it. Like, it just fit for him. And it was so funny. I did that with my daughter as well, where we just went, and it was like, okay, like, what do you think of Denison? What do you think of all these schools? And she's like, yeah. And then I was like, oh, no, when it just clicked for them. So I think for me as a parent, I was just very lucky that they were very take charge. And I had kind of done, like you said, like, we had like you need to be involved. Like, I have this rule where, like, you have to be in a sport, you have to be in a club, you need to have some follow through. You need to be doing these things. So I was just lucky, I feel like, at that point, that they were really good. Like, had this amazing high school English teacher who they will still tell you it's the hardest class they've ever taken. And I'm like, that's incredible. Like, so we were very lucky on that end. But I think for me as a parent, it was just finding the place where they weren't sure where they wanted to go. They didn't have that, this is where I want to go. And just to find the place where it was their fit, and where I knew they were going to be so just exactly where they needed to be. So I don't know. I love hearing like what your experience was with parents, and like, where do parents fit in that equation from your end? Like, we're not writing the essay for them. I can't take the SAT for you.
Yes. I like to say, my mom, I was actually talking with her. We have a lot of conversations now, obviously, about the college admissions process, because it's my line of work. And so she will say sometimes, like, I have coworkers that I see, like, their kid's finally a senior, and they're coming up on the process. And so they'll sometimes tap her and try to talk to her, because she's an empty nester now. And so, they'll be like, okay, how'd you go through it? And she's like, I don't think you recognize that it's a project management. like the same skills that you apply in the workplace, you're going to have to apply for your kid with their deadlines and all of the things. And so I think parents just want to say like, okay, knowing that, having that context, where do I want to kind of fit in that role? And so I know for so many parents, they're like, it's so helpful to have someone else that I feel like who is like on top of my student and like knows the deadlines, knows what they need to be doing and when. And I always like to say it's kind of like a team where like in the home, the parents just supporting their kid moving throughout those different phases of the structure that we've set up. And so I think for a lot of parents, it's, you know, your student best. They're at a really anxious time. How can you support them? While they're also obviously needing to be held accountable in some manner as they're moving throughout these deadlines that are high stakes and important because it's college, right? It's the next 4 years for them. So
don't miss the deadline.
Don't miss the deadline. So I think it's a delicate balance. Like I see sometimes people are very hands off and that can kind of lead to missed deadlines. And then sometimes people are very hands on and that can lead to resistant from a student too if they have too much parental pressure. So I think it's just finding that middle ground of how can I be supportive and also help my student with all of the things that they're managing.
Yeah, so good. Okay, this just brought to mind a question that I gave Janae questions that I wanted to like know about, but now all these other questions are in my head.
Please keep them going.
And I'm like, okay, I have one. So the state of Indiana is now doing like all juniors take the PSAT, all seniors take the SAT, whereas before it was just like, you can take it if you want, let's sign up, here's like test Saturday, you know? And now they're taking it. And at the same time, a lot of state schools, or not necessarily Indiana state schools, but I think country, like nationwide, we're seeing them say, oh, well, we don't necessarily need SAT, ACT scores. What if that is a thing? Like, how does that affect admissions or the process?
Such a great question. So test optional is, I think, one of the most poorly communicated things in the college application process. I don't think schools have given parents and families the information they need to actually make a good decision. So I'm happy to break it all down. Happy to break it all down. I like I said, I did a podcast last week and literally the podcast interviewer was like, this is wholly self-indulgent. Like I have questions about my kid. Can I ask them? I was like, absolutely. Just go for it. So with the SAT and ACT, starting with COVID, many schools went test optional, meaning that it is optional to submit your scores. That is different than test blind. Test blind schools don't consider test scores at all. There's actually not a place for them. So for example, the UC system is probably the most famous school system in the country that's test blind. They did away with test scores within the last year or two completely. So you can't even submit them. They are all test blind in California for the UC schools in California. So that kind of leaves a lot of students and parents in the situation of, do I take the test? What should I be thinking about? The general rule of thumb is that if you're within the 50th percentile, so basically the average score range for a school with the data that they share, which schools will share their data of typical test scores for a student, that you should submit. You should submit those scores. If you are not within that score range, you should not submit those scores. So I always like to say by the time you're a senior, you want to have I like to say like weapons at your disposal. Like you want to have your scores, you want to have the best grades possible. You want to prepare yourself for every different option and opportunity because a lot of teens change their mind throughout the college application process. And it's the worst to get to the point by senior year where you're like, actually, I want to go to that school and now I can't because I didn't prepare myself. So I like to say it's probably, if you can, best to take the SAT 1 or 2 times to actually have your file. And then you get to make decisions school by school based on what schools you want to submit to and what schools you don't. There are some schools in more conservative states that have started requiring test scores. So for example, the state of Georgia requires test scores. And some school systems, they'll say it on their website, will still require test scores. For competitive schools, it is advised that you take and submit scores. Even if they're test optional, just know the majority of students will. And so you want to be within that kind of bracket of students who would have the same stats that you would need to get into that school. And also, the final thing I tell families to consider is if your student tests, oftentimes you're going to put yourself in a position for merit scholarships because test scores are considered within those decisions. So what I always say is typically what that looks like is you're going to go throughout the SAT prep process, you're going to end up with a score. And what will most likely happen is there's a set of schools that you will submit that to. And if you're above the 50th to 75th percentile, they're going to oftentimes automatically enter you into merit scholarships. So you can get 5-figure, 6-figure scholarships if you do the work in preparation for the SAT and ACT, just from having competitive scores for that school. So given that, I would say most students still test, given all those factors, and then they make the best decision for them by senior year.
I have to say that I have been to so many like college prep meetings, like, hey parents, this is how to do it.
Yeah.
This is the most thorough explanation I'm like, oh, this was good. Like everybody should know this just from the parent side. I mean, I'm like, wow, these are things that I did not know, which is funny because I've done it twice and I'll do it 2 more times. But I'm like, I have no idea about any of this. This is so good. I love this.
Of course. And one last thing, just so you, as you should know as mom, the SAT is going digital in 2024. So for all of your kiddos who are still going throughout the high school process, the SAT will now be online. It will be a shorter exam. Ooh. And it will look completely different than like we have seen before, right? Because
wow,
coming up, like it was on paper. People like parents I talk to, they always have jokes about like the vocabulary and all the things. Like your SAT vocabulary was terrible. So the tests look different. So like what I'm doing with all of my clients right now is preparing them for that digital test because it is going to look different in format and length and just the way that the test is structured. For most tests so far that are on paper, it's like you get, I don't know, 20 questions, you take them in order, you skip the ones you can't do, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
The SAT will be adaptive.
Okay.
Of test, meaning that every student has a unique pathway. And the question that comes next is determined by how they answered the previous question.
Wow.
Yeah. So that will come into effect March 2024. The entire College Board will now be online, and the PSAT that most students are taking in October this coming month will be digital as well.
Okay.
Yes, the ACT will still remain on paper. So if you're listening and you're like, my student really doesn't do well with online tests, the ACT will still be on paper so they can take it. And that's helpful context that I'm kind of gearing all parents and students up for right now.
This is so interesting because in my head, like if I'm picturing kids taking tests on computers, I'm like, I hope somebody gives them some paper because I'm my daughter and I just joked about this. Like I'm planning out this presentation I'm going to do to a bunch of high schoolers who it's this program where they're all like very entrepreneurial high schoolers. And I am planning it with like paper and pen because it's so much easier for me. And I'm like, wow, that's going to be a really interesting shift to see how that goes, I think.
Will be a very interesting shift. And I do believe they will have paper, like scratch paper that they can write it out on. But no, it's definitely, it's something to be aware of, which is why, like I said, it's just helpful to be in the know. I literally have a parent letter where I just send out stuff of like, hey, moms and dads, these are things that I think you should know because things change so fast in the college process.
That is incredible. Okay. So what is the biggest piece, like if you were to say, this is the one thing I want you to know. Ooh. Like, this is it. You got to know this one thing. And if you do this, it doesn't matter if you are applying to MIT or you're applying to like the community college down the street.
Yeah.
This.
I would say you have to know your application story. So a lot of the work that I do with students is knowing who they are confidently and being able to convey that in their application. And you have to have a very specific idea of who you are and what your story is and what you bring to the table. It's some of the most important work that supersedes the application process, because when you do that work in high school, you step onto a college campus with so much more clarity of who you are and how you can take advantage of the opportunities that you have because you know what you want. So like for me, like I said, my rule of thumb for sophomore and junior year is rigorously explore the curiosity sparks that are coming up for you. So I always walk parents through the journey. When I was maybe probably like 13, 14. I wanted to be an actress. And so I was really into theater, and I did theater in high school. And then my grandmother was like, I don't think you should do that long term. So I decided to
Thanks, Grandma.
something else. And then I decided on anesthesiology. I thought I wanted to go into medicine for a while. And then I couldn't stand the sight of blood, but I started a club and I did all these programs. So I got that context. And if I hadn't, I wouldn't have known that. And then, but as I was going throughout that journey, I was just picking up on, okay, well, what did I like about these things? With being an actress, I liked being able to vocalize my thoughts and feelings. And when I was trying to go into medicine, I wanted to help people. And so when I landed on entrepreneurship, I said, oh, wait, this has the qualities that I wanted in a line of work. And so by that point in time, I knew very clearly what I liked and who I was and what I was good at by the time I settled on entrepreneurship in high school. And so when I was expressing myself in my application, the way you build an application story is that you have 3 core themes. I do this with all of my students. So for me, when I was applying to Stanford, my themes were education, entrepreneurship, and social impact, which built up to this larger vision of how I wanted to be an educational entrepreneur. That was my thing. And so that differentiated me from someone who just was like, I want to go into business. Right? Then it's a very specific thing that you want to create impact in, and schools take notice of that because they're looking for who's going to come on our campus and do really great things on this campus and beyond and bring us a lot of donor money. That's literally the way schools think. So you as an applicant have to be thinking, okay, how can I sell them on the vision for impact that I have? And for any parents or teens who are listening that are like, I don't exactly know what that is, that's completely okay. I always say, like, go with what you know right now. Go with what you know that you like, with who you are, and let that shine in your application with authenticity. Because oftentimes students will compare themselves to so many different people and say, okay, well, my friend's doing this and my friend's doing that. And they'll overlook all the unique things that make them who they are. From that one challenge you overcame, or that time you stepped up as leader, or those little things that really light up your eyes when you talk about them, those are the things you want to put in your application. And when you do, you'll naturally have a very compelling narrative that colleges will take note of.
Oh, so good. And I'm thinking, even as like a 47-year-old, I'm like, just to be able to say that I actually knew that much about myself as a teenager, because it is such an intense, I mean, they're trying to figure out who they are. And half the time I'm like, I'm trying to figure out who you are. How do you know who you are? You know, it's like, who are you today? So, but just being aware enough to say, okay, let's just get to know you a little better. You need to just get to know yourself, and letting them have that freedom where we don't necessarily pigeonhole them into this one way of being because they thought they wanted to be an actress. So they thought they wanted to be like my daughter who's 15, she's like, I want to be a cardiologist and I want to go to Stanford. And I'm like, yeah, do it.
Oh my God, I'm so happy to talk to her. Oh my God.
Right? And I'm like, is that still what you're thinking? Because if it is, we need to like button it up. You know? So I mean, but what, like, those thoughts and just like what made you think that, and being able to explore that without the pressure of saying you need to pick now.
Yes.
Like, you need to pick this thing.
I think trusting that I was going to figure it out. Like, I think that was just like the baseline. It was like, I'm going to figure it out. And I always laugh. I'm a Leo. And so for a lot of my students who don't sometimes have the confidence, I'll be like, borrow my Leo energy for you. Like I'll say, borrow my belief in you. And so I just felt confident, like, in whatever it is that I choose to do, I will be successful. And I will figure it out along the way. And I can always change my mind. That's still my life coaching that I offer to so many of my teens. I'm like, your entire teenage journey and then your 20s, it's just figuring things out. You're going to change your mind a million times over, but it's trusting that you're always going to have your own back and that you can always make a different decision. So like, for example, the application story that I wrote when I got into Stanford, I mean, like, I knew I was in entrepreneurship, but I think I said I wanted to go into like marketing. That obviously is not what I do now. And so I changed my major the second I got on a campus because I got more information. But at the time, I was just going with what I knew. And what they're looking for more is your certainty. Your certainty, conviction about who you are and the impact you want to have. They're betting that you're 17 and you're probably going to change your mind on a few things, but they're like, who's committed to making this world better than they were born into it. And
Whew.
who can convey that? We want them on our campus, of course. And so I think that's probably the biggest thing most students are missing in their application. And it's the thing that it's going to bring the most dollars, the most money, and the most acceptances.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Like so good. And how okay, all the parents just need to take a breath that we can let them, we can let them have a lot of wiggle room and just let them be certain in themselves, which I think is such a big deal for teenagers, but also for adults. If you are in your 20s or 30s or 40s or anything else, that it's okay if we change our minds, and it's okay if we're like all of a sudden, oh, wait, I want to try this. And
yes. Yes.
let's drop the "you're too old" or "you too young" idea and just say,
yes.
no, I can figure this out. That is so good.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And the one thing that I would offer to teens, also, any teens that are listening, is just to go for it. I can't describe, I said to someone like last week, there is a certain level of peace in your life, I think, when you know that every opportunity where I could have shrunken and played it safe versus when I could have gone big for my goals or my dreams, if I took every opportunity and I went big for it, like there's a certain level of peace in knowing you're playing full out, like you're living life to full potential. And it's indescribable of just knowing like, if something happened to me, I gave it all that I had. Like I lived life to the fullest. I didn't play small in any opportunity. I took every opportunity and made the most of it. And so for anything that you're hesitating of like, should I go for this? Like, should I do it? Like start the club. It doesn't matter if no one comes. Start it anyways. Like do the opportunity, explore the interests that you have, go for the things that you want to do, because you never know when that spark of curiosity is going to turn into something magical.
That is the best advice for everyone on the planet. Like that is, yes.
I always say, if I hadn't tutored like my first student by a trash can after cheerleading practice, where would I be? And actually, for anyone who's listening, I've tutored for thousands and thousands of hours. I have hundreds of students in my programs. My first tutoring client quit after my first session because I was a bad tutor. Like at first, I didn't know what I was doing. And so like, you don't have to, it doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to start. You just have to take that first step and trust that the more you do that, you build a pattern of playing life out in its full potential.
That's perfect. I always I have this thing where if everybody was doing the thing that they knew they needed to do, right? Like if they were like, I have this thing, I'm not really going to do it, but gosh, that would be great if I could actually do that. If we all played for that, how incredibly different would things be if we were just stopped being so worried all the time or anxious about what everyone else thinks, or what if I don't do it right or anything else, but just to be like, I'm in, like all in. Yes.
No, 100%. 100%.
It's such a fun thing to imagine. Someday I think we're going to get there.
I do too. And it brings me so much joy. Sometimes people say like, you work with high school students. And I'm like, yes, they're the best people to talk to on a day-to-day.
They are,
because they're so creative. They have so much inspiration. They're not jaded and they want to make the world better. Like I have helped my students do everything from building mental, like one of my teenage clients, he's like 14. And he was like, I just have noticed that there's not a lot of mental health support for boys at my school. And that like people aren't talking about things, like it's very hush hush. And I said, okay, well, let's build that at your school. And so he's like building out a basically like how to talk to your friends about mental health mentorship program at his high school.
Amazing.
And so like, that's just one of like all of the different things that make my students light up, from like environmental activism to social justice to genetic research. And so I get to talk to them about all the different things that they want to do. It's so fun. So I have so much hope in the world of like this new generation of students that's emerging is just so full of life. So I agree with you.
They are, and they're big thinkers. And thank goodness that they're willing to go to those places that I'm like, somebody's going to have to get us out of this mess. And I'm pretty sure it's not going to be my people. So thank goodness for they are out there. So that is amazing. How do people find you to work with you? How do they get on your parent newsletter? Because that sounds amazing. Like, how do they do it?
Yes. So you can go and schedule a consult if you want to work with me at my website, janaetutoring.com. My first name, JANAE tutoring.com. That has the link to schedule a consult. You can read about all of my offers and also get on my parent newsletter. And my social media channels are the same on Instagram, Janae Tutoring, and on Facebook, Janae Tutoring. That way you can kind of check out what I'm doing and also direct your team to follow me on Instagram. If you're like, they're always on social media, so they'll follow her there. They can find me there.
Yes, and all of those links will be in the podcast and the show notes. It'll also be in the email that goes out so that people can find you and connect with you. And oh my gosh, this has just been the most fun and such a joy. I'm not kidding you. Since January, I'm like, I have to talk with her.
I'm so glad we got the chance to connect.
Yes, thank you so much. I just love this.